Haunted by dreams. The Christians journeyed 3 days by foot without incident, but grew increasingly exhausted from crossing the mountainous terrain. Coming to an unusually large tree along the road, John, who had become their unofficial leader, suggested they camp out under the tree for a day or so to regain their strength. There was no rush, but the reality of their dilemma was beginning to set in, and Purnima was growing increasingly fearful. She didn't want the others to know, but she had been crying herself to sleep, and since leaving her village, vivid dreams of her mother had been haunting her sleep. This night would be no different. March 8, Purnima's birthday. Purnima snuggled next to her mom, looking up into the clear night. They loved to gaze at the stars together, pointing out imaginary shapes. Being the younger daughter, Purnima was able to spend more time with her mom, and she never felt more secure than when the two of them were alone together. "So, birthday girl, what are you going to do now that you're all grown up?" her mother jested. "Grown up? What do you mean, grown up? I'm only 14, Purnima said, giggling. She often felt trapped between her youthful spirit and the limited responsibilities of being adult, but tonight she was just her mother's little girl. Purnima's joy was short-lived, abruptly ending when she spotted 4 officers coming out of the field towards them. She began to panic, realizing the men were coming for her. Curiously, her mother didn't seem to notice. Before Purnima could escape, the 4 officers had surrounded her. One of them tightly grabbed her, driving his long fingers into her arm so hard that her hand tingled from the restricted blood flow. "Let me go, you're hurting me," she pleaded. There was no answer. Slowly Purnima was being pulled away from her mother and away from her home. Both seemed to dissolve into the distance. "Mom, Mom," Purnima's voice echoed back towards home. "Please help me. Please make them stop." But it was no use. Her mother sat silently on her chair as if nothing was happening. Purnima awoke with a harsh jerk, taking a deep breath as her mind slowly came back to reality. She could taste the salt from the tears that had dried around her mouth. She wondered if she would ever get used to feeling so alone. It was pitch black, and only a sliver of the moon was visible, casting a faint glow on the large branches above her. As her body began to shiver, she pulled her light jacket tighter around her shoulders, bunching up the sweater that served as her pillow. Purnima's eyes peered through the darkness. She was amazed how frightening the silence of the night could be. "Is it really my birthday?" she thought to herself. Purnima tried to figure out what day of the month it was, but it was no use. The events of the last few weeks had happened so fast she had lost track of the days. Not that it mattered now. She wondered how she would survive the days, weeks, and even years to come. All she knew for sure was that she was terribly homesick, and as she drifted back to sleep, Purnima thought again of her mother's sweet face and the warmth of her touch. Bruised, bleeding, and broke. Get up, and hand over your money, and we will let you live." Purnima was rudely awakened by loud voices and the impact of a heavy boot slamming into her side. "I said, get up." The pain ripped through her body as the unknown assailant kicked her again. She couldn't tell how many men were attacking them, but there was several of the bandits. Her small group offered no defense. The vivid cries of her traveling companions told her that they too were coming under the harsh blows of the thieves. Purnima tried to shield herself as she was repeatedly kicked and beaten. Paralyzing fear gripped her body, but suddenly a verse from the Bible flooded her mind, and she thought it was from the Gospel of Matthew. "Do not fear those who kill the body." Kill the body, she repeated to herself, praying that wasn't to be her immediate fate. Her mind raced as she remembered the lot of money her father had given her. As the mob continued to rampage through the makeshift camp and plunder their meager possessions, Purnima struggled to grab the money hidden in her belongings before the thieves discovered it. Her hand found what it was looking for just before she received another painful blow that landed squarely in her back, knocking the wind out of her. She cried out to God as she brought her arms in to protect herself and attempting to roll away from the harsh boot that kept smashing into her body. After the outlaws had sufficiently terrorized the weary refugees and confiscated all their possessions, the robbers lined up 4 of the Christians, including Purnima. None of the refugees dared to say a word as they stood facing their attackers. There were about 12 of them, each with a bandana tied around his face. Purnima looked at the others standing beside her. Each was frozen in fear. She knew it would be nothing for the thieves to shoot them on the spot. You should not report this to the police," one of the men warned as he carelessly swung a pistol in front of them. "If you do, we will come back and kill you." His fingers remained on the trigger, and he continued pointing the gun in each one's face to reinforce his words. Purnima closed her eyes and wondered if she would hear the gun go off. Then she opened them. The thieves were gone. The wounded victims gathered together as best they could and began surveying the damage. Although they were thankful to God for sparing their lives, all of them were bruised and bleeding, and all quickly realized they had nothing left. The thieves had taken everything, even their extra clothing. Never had they imagined that their journey to Nepal would harbor such dangers. The next morning, John managed to wave down a large farm truck that had a homemade wooden box behind its rusty cab. Learning the truck was heading toward Nepal, he pleaded with the driver as the others quickly gathered around. "Can you please take us with you? We cannot stay here. It is too dangerous." "Do you have any money?" the elderly driver asked as he stepped out of the cab, assessing his opportunity to make a few extra dollars. John explained how they had been robbed the previous night and had literally lost everything they owned. "Please," he continued, "some of our group can barely walk after the beatings they received." But even after he had seen their wounds, the driver of the truck refused to give them a ride. He was still focused on making a profit. John and the others began to turn away, discouraged by their lost opportunity of a ride. When Purnima spoke up, "I have some money," the others looked at her in astonishment, wondering how she could possibly have any money after what they had been through. The robbers had been extremely thorough in their search. "Let's just say I hid it carefully," Purnima said, smiling as she handed the money to the driver. The youngest of the 9 refugees became their hero as they all hugged her and piled into the back of the truck. It wouldn't be the last time Purnima's clever and generous nature would come in useful. The rising afternoon sun refreshed the small group of Christians and helped fight off the endless chills from sleeping on the cold, damp ground. And while most took the opportunity to get some sleep, Purnima again thought of her mother, and for the first time she started questioning whether she had made the right decision. Perhaps she should have kept her faith a secret, as Maya had suggested. She opened the Bible Sybil had given her after her baptism and remembered to thank God that the thieves had found no use for it. Turning the pages, Purnima quickly found her favorite passages. She had read them 100 times and marked them so she could find them more easily. Ever since her early visits with Maya, she had been fascinated by the adventurous stories in the Bible. She thought about Mary and Joseph fleeing to Egypt, about how David had run from the hands of King Saul, and about her favorite Bible character, Moses, who had fled from Egypt. These stories fueled Purnima with courage to face another day. Clutching her Bible, she knew she was in good company.